Now, former South African Broadcasting Corporation Chief Operations Officer Chris Maroleng says he was unfairly dismissed by the public broadcaster. He's suing the corporation for 16 million rand. Maroleng was shown the door after being found guilty of 3 out of the 4 charges he faced. He joins me now to talk about his court challenge. Good evening to you, Chris, and thank you so much for coming in tonight. Firstly, let's talk about this court challenge. Why do you think you have prospects of success here?
Well, in essence, what we are arguing, Cathy, was that the dismissal that was carried out against me by the SABC was done so in a fashion that was unlawful. And we're actually asking the courts to declare it void. In essence, we are saying that because this dismissal was conducted in a manner that did not meet the various regulations which we stipulate in my application, that it should be a situation where it is as if it did not actually occur.
Now, you're facing quite a challenge on your hands, because it wasn't just the CEO who you seem to highlight as being the main reason why this decision was taken. Ultimately, the board seemed to agree with him in as far as having you out of your job is concerned.
Well, that is actually not the case, because when I was dismissed on the 23rd, ostensibly a board meeting was held which was set up really as an induction for a new board. And our argument, which we actually stipulate and state in our papers, was that this board was effectively wet behind the ears. They had not had enough time to familiarize themselves with my matter. They had not had time to familiarize themselves with the work of the SABC, to the extent that it would appear that certain members of the SABC were pushing this board towards a decision before they could familiarize themselves with it, which is indeed actually unfortunate and unlawful.
Now, are you saying that the board, in making this decision, wasn't credible in its considerations of your matter?
I'm actually saying that the board had not familiarized itself with all of the particulars of my matter. The other thing that we're saying is that in terms of our code of conduct at the SABC, there is a process where any senior member, including a COO like I was at the time, is given an opportunity to appeal to the board. I was not given, Cathy, an opportunity to make such an appeal. And this is why I am before the courts, because proper process was not followed, to the extent that I find myself in a situation where I need to go to the courts to seek justice, and outside of the system that should have been put into place to ensure a sound effect of justice.
Of course, some officials at the SABC have put on record that as an executive director, you are in fact not entitled to any of the internal appeal processes which you are now invoking.
This is actually not correct. One of the things that we argue is that in terms of the Labour Relations Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act and other provisions, our Memorandum of Incorporation, the Broadcasting Act, actually contradicts such a statement. And this is why, Cathy, it becomes difficult for me to be in this situation, because it's as if I am trying to insist that the rule of law should prevail, that sound process should be used even against myself, notwithstanding my position at the SABC.
Now, in the aftermath of this decision, you had launched a bid with the CCMA. Why did you withdraw it?
I withdrew it because what we actually realized was that the CCMA, in terms of escalation, is at the lower level of where one seeks justice. And this talks to processes related to, let's call it, fairness, the materiality. And what the CCMA does is simply review a case going backwards, i.e. they look at the disciplinary case. When we decided to take the court directly to the Labour Court, we had simply received new information that was damning, that we refer to and make reference to in the court papers that we served with the Labour Court on Friday.
Now, of course, one of the biggest challenges you'll face is that ultimately you did have this disciplinary process that did find you guilty of several charges. That does not go away. And you are one of the individuals that was brought in to effectively clean up the SABC, as it were, and you were guilty of those transgressions. With the benefit of hindsight, do you think that there are things that you could have done differently that lended you to being in the situation?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Because in a situation where, as you indicate, you're brought in to fix, very often you take decisions and you take steps that ultimately are intended to ensure the turnaround, the quick turnaround of the SABC because of the situation where it was. Now, the inverse is that one would sit back and say, we do nothing. We do not engage in any conduct that might bring scrutiny. But when you are operating in an organization where people are hell-bent in finding issues and nitpick on them simply because they want to get rid of you, it doesn't matter whether you go through a DC or not. It simply was the intention of these guys to constructively dismiss me. And this is what I'm putting on the record.
Chris, I'm going to continue our conversation for a bit in a moment. We have to take a short break. I'm back with your headlines, and we'll wrap up our conversation with the former CEO of the SABC, Chris Maroleng. Thanks for staying with News at Prime. Now, former South African Broadcasting Corporation Chief Operations Officer Chris Maroleng is arguing he was unfairly dismissed by the broadcaster. He's now suing the corporation for 16 million rand, or he wants to be reinstated into his job. I wonder, what kind of setting, should the court agree with you, what kind of setting do you think you're going to be walking into at the SABC, and do you really want to go back to that job?
Look, Cathy, the remedial action that we request is stated in the papers that we've submitted. You know, it's either that they compensate me to the extent that my contract was still in effect for another 4 years, and that is why we come up with that figure. The alternative is that they reinstate me to my position, a position that I was unfairly dismissed from, a position that I'm more than willing to return to give effect to the turnaround that we had planned and were undertaking at the time.
The position, of course, has been filled. They've announced a permanent candidate in that post. It seems that the SABC has moved on.
The SABC may well have moved on, but I haven't. And the people of South Africa haven't. Because there was a realization that the significant need to turn around the SABC was in the public interest, Cathy. However, certain individuals within the corporation appear now to have hijacked it, are using it to their own personal interest, and I will do everything to find full satisfaction and ensure that either I'm reinstated or requisite compensation is made.
Who are these individuals that you're saying have hijacked the public broadcaster? Sure. Because those are very damning allegations.
Yes, they are damning allegations. In actual fact, we refer to them in the papers that I have put forward. We give sight to a matter that was actually heard at the SABC, which was a grievance case that was brought by an employee at the SABC, a general manager, who overheard a conversation and other things which seemed to indicate that there was a conspiracy between the chairperson of the SABC and the CEO, where they actually make utterances to the effect that we need to get rid of this guy, referring to myself. There are also other instances where other people in other cases related to the SABC make direct reference to the fact that there appears to have been an attempt to purge those who certain members of the senior executive and the board were not fond of. So this gives us real rise to say that we cannot have a public institution, a state-owned enterprise, which is run as if it's a personal fiefdom of certain people. There are articles and acts that ensure that the SABC must be run accordingly and following the rule of law.
And of course, all of that then will be up to the courts to decide. I wonder, when it comes to the 16 million rand, the SABC, you would know better than most of us the extent to which it's facing its own financial battles. Do you think that that's a fair ask, in fact, an ask that you think will be able to be met by an organization that's had to be bailed out numerously?
Cathy, before I was dismissed, I think they should have thought about that and the impact that it's had on my own financial well-being, the impact that it's had on my reputation. I'm really fighting for this to restore my reputation, which has been slighted and besmirched by false accusations and what appears to be a conspiracy to oust me from my role. I think it should have been clear from the onset, if they were unwilling to ensure that full effect and protections of all employees are put into place at the SABC, I should not be out of my job today.
All right. Well, it sounds like you're ready then for the legal fight that this might turn into. And, of course, this matter now before the Labour Court. We'll have to wait and see exactly how it unfolds. Chris Maroleng, the former COO of the SABC. That's how we leave it with that interview for tonight.